R22 limitations. Understanding these limitations is crucial for safe and efficient flight operations. Let's break it down. So in front of us, we have the limitations overview section. Understand that the general limitations, this section includes operating limitations, instrument markings, basic placards required for safe operation of the helicopter, its engine and other standard systems. The helicopter is approved as a normal category rotorcraft under the FAA type certificate number, and you can see it there. Now let's talk about the color codes. They actually mean something. We have red, yellow, and green. Red, it's not good. Usually it means an operating limit. Edge of the red line indicates a limit pointer should not enter red during normal operations. Red is dead. Just remember that. Yellow is precautionary or special operating procedure range. And then green is normal operating range. Then we also have some airspeed limits. So V&E for the R22 is up to 102 knots, up to 3,000 feet. Above 3,000 feet, there's going to be a placard on 211 that we'll be able to see, but we'll look at that in a minute. Now let's talk about some rotor speed limits. We got a power on and a power off, 104, 101, and a power off is 110 to 90. And you'll notice on the transient operation at lower RPM is permitted for emergency procedures training. And then there's a double asterisk here for the minimum. 97% at 495 is permitted on the R22s with the O320 engine and the tachometer with 97 to 104 green arc installed. So different R22s will have different tachs. Just be aware of that. Now let's talk about the power plant limitations. We have a Lycoming IO320, A2B, A2C, B2C, or O360 J2A. When you're flying your actual helicopter, it will specify, or you'll specify which helicopter you're going to be taking your check ride in. So it's important to know those informations. You have some operating limits. Now, everything within the limitation section, you're going to have to know or memorize for the check ride. So create those flashcards, right? Operating limits for the engine speed, there's going to be a maximum continuous as 104, and then a maximum transient at 106. There's a cylinder head temperature maximum of 500 degrees, oil maximum temperature 245, oil pressure minimum during idle, during flight, maximum during flight, and maximum during startup and warm up. Hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I was asked these on my private check ride. You may be as well. Oil quantity, you need a minimum of 4 quarts. Manifold pressures, you can see the placards later. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have some weight limits. There's going to be the maximum gross weight, which you have to know for the standard and HP. Obviously, we're not flying those anymore, but it's 1,300. For the alpha, beta, and the beta 2, 1,370 is where they get these numbers. And then the minimum gross weight is 920 pounds. And the maximum per seat, including the baggage compartment, is 240 pounds. I want to highlight that because it may be on a written test or maybe on a oral portion for a check ride. He'll give you a scenario of like, hey, I got a passenger that's 220 pounds and he wants to carry 40 pounds worth of bags. Can you do it? No. Well, unless you put the 40 pounds under your own seat or whatever. I don't know. But know that this baggage compartment limitation is including the baggage compartment. So maximum seat weight, I can't even talk. The maximum seat weight limit plus bags, or including the bags, is important to understand. Then we also have some center of gravity limits, and then with both doors installed and both doors off and so on and so forth, there may be additional limitations. So the R22, anytime that you're looking at any of these charts, what you want to do is make sure that you're looking at the right chart, because you don't want to start doing your weight and balance calculations like this on the wrong chart. So if you're flying a beta or a beta 2, which is like 99.999% of you, you're going to be using this one for your weight and balance and gross weight calculations. Let's talk about some flight and maneuver limitations. There's aerobatic flights is prohibited, so sorry, I can't pull off the Red Bull loops. Also, abrupt control inputs may produce a high fatigue stresses, causes catastrophic failure of critical components. And then obviously the low G cyclic pushovers are prohibited. And then a little bit of a cautionary tale there. Flight is prohibited with the governor selected off. Exceptions for in-flight system malfunctions or emergency procedures training. So throughout your training, you may have a simulated governor failure, so it's okay to turn it off during simulated training times. But other than that, if you're flying around with your friends and your family, don't turn it off. Leave it on all the time. You can't fly into known icing. Maximum operating density altitude 14,000 feet. Good luck reaching that, but know that you can't go above that. Alternator and RPM governor, lower RPM warning system, and outside air temperature gauge must be operational for dispatch. I want you to make note of that, because these are going to be on the exam, either on the written tests that you're going to be taking later, or more importantly, the oral exam when you go for your check ride. The examiner may be like, hey, you notice that the outside air temperature gauge is not working. Can you go fly? And according to the limitations, which is an FAA approved document, we cannot. So unfortunately, all right, minimum crew is 1 pilot, which I always thought was kind of funny, but it is in the right seat. So if you had that burning question, can I fly from the left seat by myself? No, you can't. Flight instructor may act as a pilot in command from the left seat. Solo flights are from the right seat only. Okay. Left seat belt must be buckled, which is a weird one. You'd think like, why does it matter? Even with the doors on, like, why do I need the seat belt? Well, it says left seat must be buckled. Okay. There you go. Operation with either or both cabin doors removed is approved. Loose items in the cabin must be properly secured. That's just kind of a no-brainer. Functioning headset must be worn by each pilot. We also have kinds of operations. So what is the limitation of the aircraft itself, right? So we are able to do VFR day and night operations. That's awesome. VFR operations at night is permitted only when, and then here's the thing. So know this for the test when you go for the exam, because you may be asked a question about, okay, you want to go flying at night with your friends and you'd notice one of the anti-collision lights are out. Can you fly? Well, according to 91-205C or whatever, no, you can't. But also in here, it says instrument, when landing, navigation instrument, anti-collision lights are operational. So here's another limitation that we have to adhere to. Okay. Orientation during night flights must be maintained by visual reference to the ground. Okay. Objects illuminated solely by the lights on the ground are or adequate celestial illumination, meaning like a full moon, partial moon, that type of thing. Or let's say you're flying in the city and there's plenty of lights down that you can see. If you're flying way out in the sticks, out in God's country, you need to have enough celestial light to illuminate the ground so you can see. Obviously, you don't want to hit the ground. You wouldn't expect that, right? Anyways, and then additional requirements outside the United States. Don't worry about that. Okay. Fuel limitations in terms of approved fuel and grades. We have 100 low lead, 100 V low lead, and then UL 91, UL 94 clear, and then all of the colors. Keep in mind, like, you are able to use unleaded gas, but it will severely affect the detonation inside of the engine, and you'll actually start to eat up the cylinders. I was involved in a long ferry flight for R22, basically circumnavigating North America and South America, and there's an auto gas conversion that the guy did, and it was really kind of interesting. But so 99 times out of 100, we're doing 100 low lead at your local airport, so don't worry too much about it. But it's just more gee whiz information. Again, continuing with fuel limitations, we have a fuel capacity. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Remember these. These are going to be on the exam. How many gallons can we take? Is that usable fuel versus unusable? So total gallons versus usable. Know those. And then also tanks with bladders or with tanks with bladders or without bladders. Know which one you have and which one you're going to be using for the check ride. Whatever aircraft you're going to be using for the check ride, memorize that limitation, right? So, and need to know in the main tank, in the auxiliary tank, total capacity, and then usable capacity. And then there's a notice about the service bulletin for fuel tanks without bladders should no longer be in service, so on and so forth. But there are still people, whatever. I don't judge. All right. So now let's talk about instrument markings. We have an airspeed indicator that has a green arc from a 50 to 102, which is kind of fun if you look at the airspeed indicator on there. And then the red line's at 102. Okay, that red line meaning don't go past. Red, you're dead. Rotor tachometer, we got a yellow arc, 60 to 70, lower red line. You can see all these numbers. And what is fun is basically being able to look at your actual aircraft in the airspeed indicator, or the rotor tachometer in this case, and look at the core. Oh yeah, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because again, you will be asked this on the check ride, or you could be asked. Now there's the oral portion and there's the flying portion. When you go on the oral portion, they're going to be asked a bunch of like fuel capacity type stuff. When you're in the flying portion, he's going to point to the gauges and be like, hey, what's this line mean? What's that mean? What's this mean? What's that, of all of the gauges. So come and reference in the limitations. So you got the rotor tachometer and the engine tachometer and all of their corresponding markings. Keep in mind that 0320 engine that we talked about a little bit earlier is 97 to 104 rather than the 101 to 104. So that's the smaller engine, the 0320 rather than the 0360. Also continuing on, we have the oil pressure limits. Know these, love these, learn these. I got asked these not on my private, but on my commercial ride I did, but it's always good to just memorize, just rote memorization. And then the one that was asked was like minimum for engine startup and run up for oil temperature, oil pressures during start and warm up, 115. Memorize that. Sorry to get off track here, but that just reminded me. So oil pressures, here's the yellow line, yellow arc, lower red line, yellow arc, green arc, yellow arc, and then red line up there. Okay. Oil temperatures, again, you need to know these or be able to look at the gauge and interpolate off of the gauge. Cylinder head temp is again green arc, red line. There's no yellow. Manifold pressure arcs denote variable manifold pressure limits. See placard and 211. We'll get to that in the next page. So now we're talking about the standard HP alpha, beta, and beta 2. So you're most likely going to be flying either the beta or the beta 2, depending. And then the carburetor air temperature gauge, -15 to 5. So have a good idea of these numbers, if not memorize all of those numbers. Can't go wrong. Now, anytime you're using any of these placards out of the POH, they're going to show you the standard, the HP, the alpha, the beta, and the beta 2. So be sure that, whenever you're taking written tests, like quizzes, like in this course, be sure that you're looking at the correct one in your book. So I'll just say that beta 2. I'm sure you guys have seen these. If you haven't already, here's limit manifold pressure at different pressure altitudes, different temperatures. So for example, if I'm at 2000 feet pressure altitude, 10 degrees, I'm at 21.9. And then for maximum takeoff power, 5 minute, add 0.9. So 21.9 becomes 22.8. All right. So never exceed speeds. We have the all R22s except for the beta 2. And then we have the R22 beta 2. So keep in mind whichever one you're looking at, whichever aircraft you're flying. This is a little bit more interpolation. You maybe ask a question on the quizzes, something along the lines of 7,000 feet pressure altitude and 10 degrees, where are you, that type of thing. So you can, start with the pressure altitude, come over up to here and then slide over. But generally just start down at the pressure altitude, go up to the outside air temperature, and then laterally over. R22 beta pressure altitude, same thing. And then outside air temperature box. If it's like, 15 degrees, so 10 and 20. So you just take the difference between these two and divide it in half. So 90 and 87, that's a difference of 3. So you could say that's, 88.5 or something like that. Anytime you're doing like 5,000 feet and 15, you can do half. So it's going to be half of this and then half of this vertically. So hopefully that's clear as mud. Next one, we got placards all over the helicopter and outside of the helicopter and inside of the helicopter. Here's fuel, talking about the different kinds of fuel, fuel shutoff valve. You'll see that there, bladder style tanks, non-bladder tanks, so on and so forth, minimum weight. You'll see all the placards in or around or on the helicopter. Information per FAA AD Airworthiness Directive 9526-04. The following limitations 1 through 3 are observed unless the pilot manipulating the controls has logged more than 200 hours. So this is talking about the SFAR 73. So you have less than 200 hours. You have wind limitations for which you have to adhere. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You may be asked a scenario where leaving on the flight would violate this wind limitation. So if you come into turbulence, just forward airspeed in between 60 knots and 0.7 V&E, but no lower than 57, inadvertently encountering moderate, severe, or extreme turbulence. Note, moderate turbulence is turbulence that causes change in altitude and attitude, variations in indicated airspeed, and aircraft occupants to feel definite strains against their seatbelts. All right, that is pretty much it for the limitations. All right, folks, if you've made it this far without dozing off, very impressive. Tip of the cap. Now that you're officially a helicopter nerd like me, why not take the next step? Check out my online helicopter ground school at 3gheliprep.com. Trust me, it'll only get more exciting from here, or at least more useful.